It's time for another WrestlePlanet news update, as CM Punk gets called out by a current wrestling champion, and we have news on when WWE last contacted the straight edge superstar. All that and more coming up in today's video, but first, last August, AEW released Bea Priestley from her contract reportedly due to travel restrictions caused by the pandemic. Bea, who is based in Japan, has continued to work shows for Stardom as well as working as a valet for her real-life boyfriend Will Ospreay in New Japan. Her circumstances look like they are about to change again, with her revealing that she has wrestled her last Stardom match. Following her bout at the recent Yokohama Dream Cinderella event, Priestley lost her match against Utami Hayashita before taking to the mic to thank her colleagues before saying farewell to the promotion. Not only this, but a few weeks ago, Will Ospreay turned on her during a confrontation with Kota Ibushi, laying her out with a cutter, which signaled her exit from the company. Dave Meltzer is now reporting that Priestley turned down offers from New Japan and Stardom in order to sign with WWE. It now seems Bea will be heading back to the UK, where she made a name for herself in promotions such as Progress, WCPW and World of Sport, this time set to join the NXT UK brand as part of their women's division. Now let's get to some news from this past weekend, as a new IWGP World Heavyweight Champion was crowned at the New Japan Sakura Genesis show. The former champion Kota Ibushi took on Will Ospreay in his first defense of the belt since unifying the Heavyweight and Intercontinental Championships last month. Ospreay eventually came out on top in an excellent contest, crowning himself as the second ever World Heavyweight Champion and the first ever British wrestler to win the top prize in the company, even when you include the old lineage. In the post-match press conference, Will addressed the media, naming himself as the best British wrestler to ever live, going as far as to calling out the former WWE Champion and fellow Brit Drew McIntyre. Ospreay said, "I can name a bunch of British wrestlers who didn't do what I have done, but I would like to test myself against another British wrestler that calls himself the best. A man that held the WWE World Championship, Drew McIntyre. He called himself the best British wrestler that ever lived, so if there was ever a chance that we could work out the visas, I'd love IWGP World Heavyweight Champion versus WWE Champion between two British wrestlers." And this is something I'd personally love to see, as one of the best matches I've ever seen live was Will Ospreay versus Drew McIntyre at a WCPW show a few years ago. Drew of course has the opportunity to win back his WWE Championship this weekend at WrestleMania, so if he does manage to defeat Bobby Lashley, who knows what the future holds in this strange time in wrestling. After mentioning Drew, CM Punk's name came up, with Will adding, "Before I was champion, a man who sparked a whole lot of interest in pro wrestling, CM Punk said he'd like to face Will Ospreay. Now I have the biggest prize in pro wrestling, so if you really want to prove you were the best in the world and not just the best of a bad bunch, come over here and try and take this." This comment is in reference to a recent interview where CM Punk named Ospreay as one of the few names he'd be interested in working with should he ever step foot inside a wrestling ring again. Could the opportunity to wrestle one of the best in the world for a title he's never held before be enough to tempt CM Punk back to the wrestling business? It seems unlikely at this point, but if New Japan want to continue their expansion into the States, Punk would be the perfect signing, with him being the biggest free agent left on the market in America. And speaking of CM Punk, in a recent interview with TMZ, he was asked about the upcoming Chris Jericho appearance on Steve Austin's Broken Skull sessions on the WWE Network and Peacock. Punk stated that he believes it shows that Vince McMahon isn't afraid of AEW, but pointed out that the show will bring more eyes to both companies. Punk said, "I think it's interesting for sure. Honestly, my major reaction and opinion on it is that I think it shows Vince McMahon isn't afraid of AEW at all, because if he was, he wouldn't allow that to happen. It feels like it's going to be softball questions. I don't know if they're going to ask Jericho all the tough questions, and nor do I think they possibly should." It will probably just be like a feel-good interview. They'll talk about Jericho's past at WWE. I'm sure they'll mention AEW, but they won't get into the hard questions that I think a lot of people would be interested in. There will be people who don't know AEW exists who will watch it and say, oh wow, cool, I didn't know that, I just thought Jericho was retired. It's a new age, and I think both companies need all the eyeballs they can get at the moment, so kudos to everybody involved. And I do agree that it's a win-win for both companies, especially if AEW is mentioned on the show. And before we continue, if you're enjoying the video, make sure you drop a like down below as it helps me out a lot. And why not subscribe as we head towards 10,000 subscribers. But let's get back to the video. The move has been made, no doubt, to drive more hardcore wrestling fans over to Peacock following the closure of WWE Network accounts in the States. WWE are trying to rebuild the subscription base that was lost during the merger with NBC's streaming service. It's safe to say that all of the fans that had an account wouldn't have made the switch, and this move has certainly stirred up some attention and will lead to many people making the jump. AEW's Matt Hardy recently took part in a Twitter Q&A where he answered fans' questions. Matt was asked by one fan if we'd ever see a Hardy Boyz reunion with them teaming together again now that Matt is in AEW and Jeff is in WWE. Hardy responded, "Yes, I think so. I feel pretty good about stating we'd both like to end our careers like we started, together as a team." With Jeff recently signing a new contract, this reunion would likely have to take place in WWE as Jeff wouldn't be able to join AEW for quite some time and Matt's contract ends first. We actually discussed the possibility of a Matt Hardy WWE return in our 10 WWE and AEW jumps that will happen in the next 5 years video, so make sure you check that out if you haven't already. And let me know what you think. Would you like to see another Hardy Boyz run? Let me know in the comments down below. And today's video should just be called CM Punk News, as we have an update on when he was last contacted by WWE, or more specifically, Triple H. Speaking on the Pardon My Take podcast, the Game was asked when he last spoke to the straight edge superstar, responding, "Last time I talked to Punk, a year and a half, a year and 3/4 ago. People go, make the call. Who says if we make the call that he wants to answer? What if we make the call and he's like, I'm not interested in doing that anymore? Maybe he's just done with it. Those are conversations that only those people can directly answer. If he wants to do it, we would get word and have those conversations, or he would make a call. There has to be a desire there to do something like that." And given this news, it seems WWE have gotten the impression that Punk has no desire to return to WWE anytime soon, which we all guessed anyway. Punk has repeatedly shut down any speculation of a wrestling return since his retirement in 2014, following a falling out with WWE higher-ups. Personally, I'd much prefer to see him in New Japan challenging Ospreay rather than seeing him go back to WWE, but of course, Vince would be able to offer more money. It also seems like a CM Punk AEW debut has passed us by, with there being many opportunities for it to happen and contact between the promotion and the man himself. And speaking of Punk, why not check out the video on the screen right now where we look at 10 cancelled AEW plans we never got to see.